Hello, Fifth and Sixth Grade. This is your video for Friday, October 23rd, and this is the second page about Israel, and of course, a lot of this should be familiar to you. But we have the main ideas. There are three of them this time, and then the details that go along with that. God gave the nation of Israel his law through blank. It was known as the Mosaic. That gives you a hint right there. Anyway, the law through, who is it? Moses, okay? It was known as the Mosaic law, I think, is a word. But we'll see. Mosaic covenant, maybe. I'm not sure. Yeah, probably the Mosaic covenant because it's a longer line there. But who knows? It may be law. We'll find out when we read through. God wanted a blank to be built as a symbol of God's presence with his people. And that was what? We talked about that a little bit. And we talked about a temple. But the thing that was built was a tabernacle, it was called. And temple was a permanent building. The main characteristic of Israelite religion was, and trying to remember what this is, but I don't remember offhand. Anyway, on each of those details, God commanded Israelites to blank his law. Mosaic law had laws about what activities led a person to be considered blank or blank. These laws were like blank lessons. The need for continual blank from uncleanliness reminded the people of the continual need for cleansing from. And these were so it's talking about actual things about the law itself. So if the people of Israel obeyed the Mosaic law, God promised to blank them. But the Israelites chose to disobey. God promised to blank the nation of Israel with blank, 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 and blank. And so Israel's history on the Mosaic covenant. By the way, on those there are 4 blanks there altogether: the blank, 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 and blank. But the second one is a 2-word thing, obviously, because there's no comma in between. Israel's history under the Mosaic covenant shows that it is a blank to keep all of God's law with one's blank. God gave the Israelites the Mosaic covenant so that nations could see the blank and blank of God. So we're talking about the Mosaic covenant here. The next one, about the tabernacle, priests offered a daily blank for the sins of the Israelites. What do you think that daily thing they offered was? What did they offer? There was only one thing they really offered, and that was a sacrifice. They did have other types of offerings, wave offerings, love offerings. They had not love offerings, wave offerings, and meat offerings. They called them, but it was bread that they would use. And so once each year, the high priest entered the most holy place in the tabernacle. We're on page 58 of the work text still, of the tabernacle, and sprinkled the blank of a sacrificed animal on the blank of the blank. The tabernacle was built according to blank blank. The items in the tabernacle were a symbol of God's blank blank and other attributes. Then the last one there, main characteristic of the Israelite religion was blank. The Hebrew name for the one true God is Hebrew name, and they're either going to give you the Hebrew name, which is Yahweh, or it's going to be Jehovah. The tabernacle was the center of what for God's people? The center of probably of worship. And 3 times a year, all the men of Israel traveled to Jerusalem for the feast of blank blank, which is also known as Passover. The feast of blank and the feast of blank. So there are 3 feasts we're going to talk about there. The Day of Atonement was the one day every year that the blank, and probably 2 blanks there, could enter the most sacred room in the tabernacle or temple. Who was it that could enter that most sacred room? It was one person, and he was the high priest. And then the act of blank blood on the Ark of the Covenant symbolized the blank for the people's blank. True atonement was made by Christ's sacrificial blank on the cross. And so we'll go ahead to the reading. And so if you can open up, and it's going to be pages 79 to 81. And so starting there at 79 about the Mosaic covenant, and that is that first section there. And so look through and you'll be able to fill in some of the blanks there. By the way, your secret word is coffee. Coffee is your secret word. It's a great secret word. It's a nice warm secret word, and it's a delicious secret word. And I have it in my delicious teacher mug that I got from a student in the past. Gives you choices: teacher, therapist, role model, therapist, especially for some of you. All of the above is what a teacher is. And by the way, I am very, very missing in elements of being a great teacher, in all honesty. But I do appreciate the opportunity to teach you all, and you guys have done a great job this year. I really appreciate it, especially you 6th graders, because I had you last year, and you did struggle a little bit, good bit actually for some of you. But I do see a lot of you really working hard and learning some things, especially in math. I really noticed a lot, and even in language. So look forward to seeing that continued improvement. And remember, if you have questions, to ask me. All right, so we'll put this aside for a moment, and let's look at this and read it together. It says, at Mount Sinai, God gave the nation of Israel his law through Moses. This law is known as the Mosaic Law. That's why I said Mosaic Law, but we'll call it the Mosaic Covenant because I think that's what they're looking for there. God commanded the Israelites to obey his law. In most ancient civilizations, the king or the ruler made the laws. In ancient Israel, God made the laws. The most well-known laws that God gave Israel are the Ten Commandments. Many of the laws applied the Ten Commandments to specific situations. And by the way, there's already a couple blanks there that you should fill in. Many of the laws applied to the Ten Commandments, I already said that. For instance, one of the Ten Commandments is, thou shalt not steal. But what if someone allows his oxen to graze in someone else's field? That is a kind of stealing. One of the Mosaic laws says that the offending person has to repay what is lost with the best of his own produce. Pretty interesting thought. If we did that today, we're not a majorly farming community or farming type of culture, but there are other things that can be done as well, or can be done that way as well. Other laws dealt with how Israel was supposed to worship God. They dealt with sacrifices and with how the tabernacle should be built. Finally, the Mosaic Law had laws about what activities led a person to be considered clean or unclean. Being clean did not mean that a person was without sin, and being unclean did not mean that a person was a sinner. In fact, it was impossible to avoid becoming unclean because normal daily life led to uncleanness and the need to perform a ritual to become clean. These laws were like picture lessons. The need for continual cleansing from uncleanliness reminded the people of the continual need for cleansing from sin. If the people of God obeyed the Mosaic Law, God promised to bless them. But if the Israelites chose to disobey, God promised to punish the nation of Israel with famine, military defeat, and exile. Remember those things, the military defeat being that two-worded thing in the middle there. The laws with their promises and threatened judgments are called the Mosaic Covenant. And there you go back to the original section there. They give you the Mosaic Covenant there in Exodus 19, 3 through 6. I won't read that. You guys can read that on your own. And then in Exodus 20, they list the Ten Commandments. Now, many of you know the Ten Commandments. There were no good number of them. God told the Israelites that one of the reasons he gave them the Mosaic Covenant was so other nations could see the wisdom and righteousness of God. If Israel had obeyed God's laws, the other nations would have seen how wise God was in giving them such good laws that made their nation work so well. Unfortunately, the Israelites broke the Mosaic Covenant repeatedly throughout their history. Even so, many nations have seen the wisdom in the Mosaic Law, and these laws have shaped the laws of other nations. All right, and so then you've got page number 80 here, and worship in the wilderness. When Adam and Eve first sinned, God withdrew his presence from them. The Garden of Eden was no longer available to people. God told the Israelites to build a place for worship. God wanted a tabernacle to be built as a symbol of God's presence with his people. That was the part that I gave you already. The priest offered a daily sacrifice for the sins of the Israelites. Then once each year, the high priest entered the most holy place in the tabernacle and sprinkled a sacrificed animal's blood on the Ark of the Covenant. That was also there in your part of your fill-in-blank type of thing. God gave Moses a plan for the materials, the size, and the placement of each part of the tabernacle. The workers took special care to follow God's plan as they built. The items in the tabernacle were symbols of God's holiness, justice, and other attributes. The tabernacle reminded the Israelites that God was providing a way for them to have a relationship with the one true God. The main characteristic of the Israelite religion is monotheism. The Hebrew name for the one true God, and this is the one that I told you, it was probably Yahweh, and that is it, Y-A-H-W-E-H. But in Hebrew, actually, that word does not have vowels in it. Just in English, when we translate it, it does. The Bible is clear about there being only one God. The key text for this truth is Deuteronomy 6:4, which says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." Jews call this important verse the Shema, which is the prayer they recite daily. The covenants God gave his people were an important part of the Israelite religion. The Abrahamic covenant gave the basis for Israel as a special, chosen nation. The Mosaic covenant gave the guidelines for life that the Israelites were to follow. The Davidic covenant, and you see the base word David there, the Davidic covenant and the new covenant included a promised future for Israel despite her disobedience. The new covenant, by the way, would be the covenant of the New Testament. And there is, of course, promise in the book of Revelation that Israel would become the promised nation again for God for that last 7-year tribulation period. God commanded the Israelites to observe their deliverance by celebrating the Passover. The Jews still celebrate Passover each year to remember what God did for them. Passover occurs in March or April. Leviticus 23:5 tells us the Passover is celebrated in the 14th day of the first month. The first month of the Jewish calendar is Nisan, or Nisan, I think it might be. The tabernacle, later replaced by the temple, was the center of worship for God's people. 3 times a year, all the men of Israel traveled to the capital city of Jerusalem for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which was Passover. Again, one of your blanks there. The Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Tabernacle, and the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Unleavened Bread lasted 7 days. The feast was a time when Israelites celebrated God's leading them out of bondage in Egypt. The Feast of Weeks was a time of celebration and thanksgiving for God's provision. It lasted 7 full weeks. The Feast of Tabernacles lasted 7 days. It was a time to remember the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. The Day of Atonement was another important time of worship for the Israelites. The Day of Atonement was the one day every year that the high priest could enter the most sacred room in the tabernacle or temple, which is also called the Holy of Holies. He would sprinkle sacrificial blood on the top of the Ark of the Covenant. This act was a symbol of atonement for the people's sins. True atonement was made possible by Christ's sacrificial death on the cross. This is a symbol of what was to come. Although many religious celebrations, by the way, the blood was from a lamb, okay? And Jesus Christ, of course, one of the names that he is given in the New Testament is the Lamb of God. Although many religious celebrations and ceremonies took place during the Old Testament period, most Israelites did not worship God as he commanded. The Israelites often abandoned the worship of Yahweh to worship the gods of other nations. Now, one of the things that I had mentioned in your syllabus was that you have extra credit possibility on page 60. If you look at page 60 in your work text, it is basically creating a piece of one of the pieces of furniture, what they call furniture, but it's one of these 1, 2, 3, 4 things that are written there right now. You have the table of showbread, the incense altar, the lampstand, or the Ark of the Covenant. And yes, it is extra credit. Yes, you are graded somewhat on the accuracy, but just that it looks good. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not expecting that. I'm expecting some effort is what I'm looking for, and I think that effort is worth getting the extra credit. So, all right, that's it. Have a good day, and we'll see you on Monday. Bye.